Welcome to our Innovation by Design Hangout series. This is designed for innovation, design thinking, and IoT design leaders to share what is working for them, as well as the tips that can make others successful. Today, we have an excellent group of panelists for our topic, Designing to Solve Consumer-Driven Problems. Okay, so with innovation and design, being sure you're solving for the right problem is critical to delivering a successful product or service. This means you're really creating what consumers will love, which we'll hear about today. And this can often mean revisiting your strategy to ensure you are solving for the right problem. During the Hangout today, you'll learn how innovation and design experts from UnitedHealth, Symmons, and Capital Factory have challenged corporate mindsets and placed the consumer front and center of their strategy and their product design. So with that, let me introduce the panelists and then have them tell you about their experiences. First, we have Ed Boudreau, VP of Product Management at Optum. Hey, Ed.
Hello.
And Optum is part of the UnitedHealth Group, a Fortune 6 company. Ed leads Fusion, an integral innovation and consulting team that leverages design thinking methodologies to drive business, experience, and development strategies. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you.
And next we have Beth Mercurio. Hey, Beth.
Hello.
Beth is the Director of Strategic Initiatives at Symmons Industries. Symmons is a third-generation family-owned plumbing manufacturing company. We see a little bit of plumbing back there behind you there, Beth.
Right.
Beth is responsible for discovering and scoping innovation pathways for the organization, ensuring Symmons is well-positioned for relevance and growth in the future. And thirdly, we have Michael Morton. Hey, Michael.
Hi, how are you?
Great. I think we're all doing great. Waiting to hear what everyone has to say. But basically, Michael is the mentor at Capital Factory Accelerator in Austin, Texas. He's working there with startups to develop their products and bring to market. And Michael has worked for Sunbeam, Oster, HP, and Dell, leading experience design projects from strategic product and experience architecture definition through research, development, implementation, and manufacturing. So as you can see, we've got a very experienced and accomplished panel today. And I am Gretchen Hoffman, Vice President of Marketing at Altitude. Altitude's owned by Accenture now and is a design and innovation firm based in Boston with clients like Under Armour, Nike, Thermo Scientific, to name a few. And my role today is the moderator. So with that, let me jump right into the panel dialogue. So really to start off, I think to help the folks listening in to get a little bit of background is, if each of the panelists, and Ed, we'll go ahead and start with you, if each panelist could really walk us through a few examples of times that you've designed in order to really solve for the consumer need versus designing for technology first. Ed.
Great, thanks so much. Yeah, so it's I find it super interesting around the word consumer itself. I actually refer to it as whom we serve. So as you can imagine, in a large healthcare company, that we serve patients, we serve providers, we serve nurses. And I think one of the most important things in consumer-driven problems is understanding what they are. Very simple statement, but an example of that is we did ride-alongs with nurses recently who go to patients' homes and they do assessments. Sounds fairly simple, but when you look at what they have to do, they have to find the location, they have to show up with their computer, their notepad, their router, and a few other things. And in doing ride-alongs with them, that's where you discover the true problems. It's not something someone's telling you, it's what you're observing. And what we observe is they have too many devices with them, too many things. So what they end up doing is using their notebook. And then later, sometime after dinner, they're putting in the information around the patient's, assessment. So we actually solve that problem by truly understanding their deep need, their deep problem, and designing, things that really made their life much better in the end. So that's for us. How do you understand that deep problem of whom you serve?
Yeah, great point. Beth, how about you?
Yeah, actually, I'll just follow on a little bit, Ed, to what you said. We are actually a large part of our business is B2B, not so much B2C. So the word consumer, same for me, doesn't resonate quite as much, but I think it is. It's who you serve and having a true understanding of all your different customers. So, we have a segmented approach. So we've divided our business into different segments. And just recently, we sort of took on a deeper level of understanding against one particular segment. And we really realized we needed to step back and do some in-depth research and understand what our customers were experiencing. What were their pain points, following them similar to a ride-along. It was more ethnographic research. What are the jobs they have to get done? What are the issues that they're bumping up against? Because oftentimes if you just ask somebody, what do you want or what are your problems, they don't know how to verbalize that. They can't tell you. So I think part of it is getting truly at the insight level and understanding where their unmet needs are. If you can solve for that, I think the likelihood of success increases pretty dramatically. So in that particular effort, we're actually still in development. But prior to that, we absolutely have understood that customization is pretty critical to our customers, the ability to design something that they want for their particular project need, whether that be a certain kind of shower or a certain kind of faucet, a look, an aesthetic, as well as a functional feature. So we actually have a cool business model here called Design Studio, where you can design your own faucet or your own shower to for your own needs. It takes a little bit of a longer lead time, but we at least have that optionality for our customers. So I think truthfully, the main thing is really understanding that all customers are not created equal, right? And truly understanding the nuances of difference, and then solving for those nuances and those unmet needs. And when you do that, that really does set you up for more success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beth, you actually, I'd love to tag along. You mentioned the word, jobs. How do you think about, the jobs that, your customer, hires you for, or tell us a little bit more about that. I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So in that context, I meant sort of like their jobs to be done. So when you're talking to them about their work, probing a little bit deeper to sort of like, so tell me about your day. Like, what is it that you need to accomplish in your day? And then you can sort of extrapolate out from them. They may not say like, this is the worst part of my day, but you can gather from talking to them and really diving in, what parts are not easy for them? What parts do they love? Why do they love them? Why is that fun for them? And then what parts of their job in their jobs to be done to be successful in their day cause them a little frustration or grief or anxiety. And those are the things that you sort of start to accumulate and say, that's interesting. And is there consistency, right? That's one interview. Once you can find that level of consistency throughout a certain customer base, that's where I think you can have the aha moment of, is this something I can solve for? And then we'll talk more throughout this session, but I think the check-ins and iterating and going back, that becomes hugely important. But that first discovery of understanding, what is it that my customer is really trying to manage through that makes their life a little more challenging, I think that has been such a great place to start, because then when you go to them with an offering, the value is so clear that hopefully they're ready to go, versus sort of like, why do I want this,
Yeah, we did the Jobs to be Done framework for the nurse ride-alongs, and what we discovered is, nurses hire us to have more time to spend with their family, and that becomes a business imperative for us to optimize their life. So it really gets at that deep need, that deep problem, and if we're able to solve for that, we have happy people that we serve. So.
Yeah, it's so great. Gretchen, you jump in. Otherwise, can I just keep talking?
Keep rolling. Keep rolling.
Get
Michael back.
Yeah. So similarly, Ed, we, part of what our discovery was within the hospitality segment in particular was that water, which is obviously a huge part and surrounds a lot of our business, right? We're a plumbing manufacturer. Is not considered a positive thing in the eyes of most of our customers. Water is seen as a pain point, right? If you're talking about water, it's not good. Something has gone wrong. Either it's not hot enough, or there's not enough pressure, or there's a leak. And so even that was a moment of like, wait, water's great. We provide great enhanced experiences in the shower. And as much as that absolutely is part of what people strive to do in the space, and we do too, design and experience are super important for the guests in the hospitality segment, there is also this other level of, hey, wait, this is actually not always great. And let's kind of better understand that.
Well, Cool.
Excellent. Excellent. I think we have Michael back. Can you hear us, Michael?
I can. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely. We'd love to hear your examples that are design-led as opposed to technology-led.
Sure. And sorry about the trouble there. I'm not sure what happened. I think the connection just had a burp.
Okay.
But I totally agree with both Ed and Beth. Into where we come to a product with preconceived notions of what it should be, especially with us in the industry, and we think, okay, what's the next thing they want? And I've on a lot of my stuff in the past, we go out and I've done a lot of work observing customers using the products. One big example was when I was at Dell, I was responsible for business client desktops, which was both the sort of basic PCs.
We can't hear you again.
Excuse me. Well, we would do a lot of testing
Yeah,
with our human factors people as far as how. I can hear you. Okay. Is that
We can hear you.
Okay.
We're good. We hear you.
We would do a lot of testing with our human factors people and have them actually check, if someone wanted to, you know, okay, to get into a computer and check out the memory, would they be able to do, was it intuitive and was the layout and the product semantics inside the box? Did it show them what levers they had to pull and switches they had to open to get the stuff out and put it back in easily? So, then we would actually measure their speed and were they doing it faster now than they were before? Were they making less mistakes or more mistakes? And we always, we would test that as we went through the process to try to make sure that there would be improvement. If we didn't find improvement, that we'd have to go back to the drawing board on that. So one kind of just a sort of an outcome that we had is we were told after our marketing people went into to Disney that they decided to switch destination systems over from because of the ease of access and things being the computers. Nice thing to hear.
Excellent. It's interesting. We had one hangout called Understanding How Design Thinkers Think, and on it, one of the panelists was talking about designing an MRI, and Ed, you may relate to this too. And they were talking about as they're going and observing how the little girl had, really a fear of the MRI, and they had really been doing more, let's say, the technology-led approach of just design the scanner device, right? And, by observing this, they said we really have to take into account all the users, right, from the drive to the hospital, during the MRI, after the MRI. And what that led them to do was say, look, this experience involves the parents, involves the users, and they came out with more of the experience-led approach was more about coming out with what was called the Adventure Series, which was essentially as the little girl is, going through the MRI, she's able to be able to have, stickers and different things inside, I'll call it the tunnel, so that she could, really imagine that she was somewhere else, right? And it made it a much more entertaining, let's say, they called it the Adventure Series, and they made it much more a feeling that she was on a space adventure instead of actually in the scanner. So I thought that was an interesting way to look at it. And it also is a good example of how you really have to look at the experience, not the technology. So I just thought I'd go ahead and add that.
I think, Gretchen, you talk about outcomes. That was Doug Dietz. It's a great YouTube video that everyone should watch around experiences. But a key moment as well is that they were able to reduce sedation of children by a dramatic degree. So not only was it a great experience for the children and the parents, but it had business outcomes attached to it as well. So great experience, great outcomes. Great.
No, thanks for adding that. I was thinking you probably knew that story because it was definitely heartwarming, to think about. Hey, Ed, while we're up here, can you share some examples that are more technology-led? So we'll flip it. And how does that change the outcome?
Yeah, I love the word flip it. So it's interesting as being in technology that you'll hear, hey, we need to use machine learning, AI, Google Glass, and that becomes the thing. And we all know it's the wrong thing to focus on. So what we do is we flip the script and we use experience design as the primary driver. So I'll give an example of that. So we had someone internally say we need to use Google Glass, and we're like, great, let's get, where do we want to focus, so that, design statement, and then what key moments do we want to, and what key people do we want to focus on, and that we actually defined it to be doctors. So we defined doctors, so we held a design session with doctors in the room, and what we're honing in on, what are the key moments for them as they go through their day. And what we found out is one key moment was when they walk from their office to the patient to see them. And it's for them, it's a little bit of wasted time. So it's a key moment for them. So we said, wow, this is a key moment in which we can apply technology to change someone's experience. In this case, it was a doctor's experience. So what we did is we have a heads-up display for them, in that they can actually understand who they're seeing, why they're here. So all of a sudden you take, doctor's time is super important, right? But you take that 23 seconds of their time feeding them information, and all of a sudden the patient's experience changes and the doctor's experience changes, because they know they're seeing Ed, he has a cough, last time we saw him was 6 months ago, but you're giving them information that helps them create a better experience for that patient. So I always try and flip the script whenever I hear technology. I'm like, cool, let's first understand who we're serving, what their journey is, what the key moments are, and how we can apply technology then. And so that's the last of the thing that we look at is the technology.
Yeah, which definitely makes sense. I mean, I think we could go on and talk about the design-led and the advantages of it, because everybody wants a great experience, right? And
yep.
It's easy to be a company that thinks you know what consumers want, who haven't talked to the customers, right? I mean,
right.
We definitely hear those stories too. So, it's interesting. We had a project in here recently at Altitude, which was with little sparrows. And it's also a good example. And I don't know if you know them, just because you're in healthcare, I'm making that assumption, but they developed a billy hut, which is a medical device. So again, they were thinking first technology, right, to treat jaundice in infants. And, a device can be pretty scary for especially new parents, newborns, pretty intimidating. And so they came to Altitude and we redesigned it to be, frankly, a more comfortable, less intimidating experience for the infant, but also so it could be something that could be portable so they could bring it home, right, to really increase the bonding experience between parents and babies and just put people more at ease, again, for the experience of, making sure as your infant hopefully is healing from jaundice that you're feeling more comfortable through the process. So, that was definitely one of those that clearly showed design-led was the winner.
Yep.
So Michael, while we have you back here, before you lose you again, let me jump in here. So could you talk a little bit, Michael, on which type of product development, customer-led or technology-led, are you seeing most often in your industry and or some of the past industries you've been in, and how is this impacting success today and then in the future?
Sure. Yeah. I want to, as I've been mentoring at Capital Factory more in the last couple of years, I'm in a lot of tech companies, seeing a lot of variety. And it's interesting that a lot of people are definitely getting the word that they've got to see what the consumers want. It's having a big influence as people are trying to pull together proof of concept projects and mock-ups and prototypes, and they know they need to test them. There's still a lot of, they still need us in a sense, because they don't necessarily know how to do it, and they don't know, what to think about as they're doing it. But what I'm seeing is a lot of people getting it to a degree. I think there's just a lot of the word getting out in business schools or training sessions and other accelerators, and people are starting to really understand that they've got to make things work well, not just for them, but for the person who really is their customer, whether it's a grandmother or a business person or a 16-year-old girl wanting a pink computer or something. So I think there's a big shift going on. It's been happening for a while, but there's more momentum going. And I don't know if the other panelists have seen that in their industries, but it's very encouraging. After that, now it's helping to guide people and help.
Yeah, I guess that.
Ed, go ahead, and if you want to add in.
I was going to say that to add what Michael is saying. It's interesting because I think we tend to think in a little bit of silos, whether it be design or technology or business. One of the things I found that breaks that pattern is some framework. So we talked about one earlier, it was the jobs to be done framework, but one that I leverage highly is the 10 types of innovation. And what it does is it really inspires people to not only look at, they have 3 different dimensions in my mind. One is platform, and that's product or technology. The other one is model, which is your business model, clearly. And lastly is experience. But thinking holistically, whether it be design or technology or business folks, if you can bring those different dimensions in to say, wow, we have a really good idea or we have a really good technology, then you look at, well, what experiences can we create? What's the current experience? Let's go test that, go do ride-alongs with consumers, whatever that might be. And then how does that really enable us to create a model? And I use 10 types of innovation all the time, but a great example is run Uber through it. So clearly they have a platform. They're creating great experiences through not only their application, but their network that they created as part of their model. So bringing those different dimensions in your thinking really helps. So it's not just design, not just technology, or not just business. It's what's that mix that we can create that will create something compelling in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think I was just going to add on, based on both what Michael and Ed said, I do believe, and I have seen this sort of move towards, I guess I would say, customization, personalization. It's almost becoming part of cost of entry to play in the space, right? You have to understand what your customer is going to want. You have to understand what is valuable to them. And I think, you mentioned this triangulation of different things coming together. I see that as value creation from an organizational standpoint. So how can we create value that our customers are going to want to buy? But you do have to look at a variety of things to create that value, right? The technology has to be there. Their desire for it needs to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But when you bring all that together and you understand how they will see the value, so your business model might have to be creative, like you were saying, for example, the services that are now provided. There's so much around service now. That's another trend I would say, right? We used to always think about products, and now it's really not about products, right? There's so many things that are service oriented where you're paying subscription fees for things and you're just getting accustomed to doing things a little bit differently. I think that's another piece of understanding your customer, right? How are they going to want to pay for this? How are they going to want to experience whatever it is that you're bringing to them? I think all of those things have to be looked at. I think, Ed, you used the word holistically. And I believe that's really I think I try to use that word a lot. Okay, well, we have how many elements? Are we looking at all of them together? Because in isolation, you could treat them very differently. But when you bring them all together, they need to fit together in a way that the value is super clear to your customer. And that it's going to drive them to say, yes, I'm going to buy this, and continue to add feature sets, et cetera, that only compel them more to want to use your product or service.
Yeah, we all have excellent points. And, we've talked a lot about addressing the consumer problem,
right?
And how critical it is to success. Before I shift gears, is there anything anyone would like to add to that point? Otherwise, I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit.
I would say it's interesting.
One thing I just thought of adding is a concept that's. Oh, sorry. I may have a bit of a delay on my end, but one of the concepts that people are talking about a lot, because I see a lot of, especially software projects, is the concept of friction. And that's a really helpful idea when you're talking to people and trying to help them understand that this needs to be looked at carefully and how the consumer will actually use the product and how it interacts with all the other systems in their lives, is how much friction, how easy it is for them to just interact. And that seems to be a great way to help people get a picture of is it well done, or are there still places it can be improved?
Ed, I think you wanted to jump in too here.
Yeah, I think one of the keys here is to have the learner's mind. So a great example is that we, you can imagine as a healthcare company, weight loss is really an important factor in someone's health. And the first thing that comes to mind is let's send someone a scale, because that'll help solve the problem, right? If they know what their weight is and all that.
I wish.
we did ethnographic research, and we found that the people that we interviewed hated their scale, and what they really needed is they said we really need a coach. This is through deep synthesis and analysis, but make sure you don't have the problem in mind. Have a design statement, a hypothesis of what you're looking to learn, and then go learn. Don't have that preconceived notion of what the problem is. So, but I think a lot of times we're, paid as professionals to have answers, right? What's the answer to this? And I think it's I call it playing in the gray, but be comfortable with being uncomfortable and giving yourself time to think, to synthesize, to understand the real problems that you're approaching.
That's a great point.
Excellent. So for the folks listening in, thank you I know we had a few technical glitches, so thank you everyone for being patient. And also, I want to make sure folks remember that we would love to hear your questions, and we will take your questions at the end in the last 10 minutes. So please either vote on the questions that are in the Ask a Questions tab, or put in the questions you would like to hear our panelists answer towards the end. And also the polls help us know how to tailor the answers based on where you may be in your innovation cycle. Okay, so with that, we also do have folks on Twitter, so please be sure to engage, altitude_Inc. And with that, I'm going to do a little bit of a shift in the conversation here, and would love to really talk a little bit more now on sharing thoughts around innovations. Can you share, let's say, Michael, since we now have you and we know you're here and we can hear you, let's say, can you share thoughts around why innovations are still internally driven?
Okay.
And is there value in this?
Yeah. It is. That's an interesting question, because I've been in situations both where there was a lot of internally focused and driven innovation, or push for innovation internally, and you can get a lot of it that way because the people who have been working with, especially more technical products, and coming up with new technologies, can come up with new ways of doing things, that hadn't been thought about just because of their interaction with the technologies. But then a lot of times as we talked about before, they can be so focused on their world that they can miss, what somebody sees as very obvious from the outside. So it's a bit of a balancing act. I think it's really, for a company to be successful, especially a larger company, it's very valuable to have those internal groups that are pushing the technologies that they've got, or looking for new ones that could apply. But I think it's really important to then take those in front of consumers and users, even if it's just the people in the hallway, in the accounting department or something, and saying, what is this? What can you do with this? Or what does this show you that might be a possibility? Or how would you use this? And watch them. And like Ed said, and I think Beth mentioned as well, you gotta just let them do it. You can't try to help them, because they'll do things that really surprise you. And that's where a lot of innovation can come from. You start actually identifying other problems that they had that you didn't even know and that they may not have known. And then you start saying, okay, how do we fix that? And we've got this suite of technologies here that we may have developed. How do we take them and apply them to that new problem, or those new ideas, and start to structure new product lines possibly. That's when I've seen real innovation happen. Is when you kind of bring together all of those elements and all of those inputs, the expert internal, and even like I said, the person on the street, who just kind of stumbles across it and starts using it in a way you'd never have thought of. I see some really interesting things happen there, and I think that's an important balance that you got to have. So not sure if it's one or the other. I think there's you gotta, to do it right and to be really innovative, you gotta have all of those elements in, or at least
Yeah,
it
it's
helps.
important, like you say, the person on the street or anyone, but you know, you can get ideas from anywhere, right? And I think keeping an open mind, right, is really critical through this process. So great points. So Beth, for companies that are struggling to adapt a user design mindset, can you share some tips to help break through any internal challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, what Michael said, I think can happen. I always say, like, we take moments and say, are we talking to ourselves here, right? It's very easy to, within an organization, really convince yourselves that you've got this and go down that sort of technology-driven path. So I think having at least, hopefully multiple people in the organization, but that can be tough. So for me, my role is absolutely to be the one who says, are we talking to ourselves? Have we iterated that back with our customers? You know, like, let's not assume anything. Let's bring it back. Let's make sure, because things change. That's the other thing. I mean, we're an over 75-year-old company, right? So some people think we know all there is to know about faucets, and that's just not true, right? Because the consumers that are using the faucets have changed, and what they expect from their faucets has changed. As silly as that may sound, it's kind of true for everything. So I think the fact that the people that are using our products and services are evolving means that you absolutely need to iterate, and you have to continue to go back to them, even if what you think may be pretty simple. There may be some opportunities that you can uncover by just bringing things back and getting their direct input. One of the things, it may sound silly, but it's been great for us, is that in every conference room, we have a bunch of chairs. I'm sure most of you can picture that, a conference room with a bunch of gray chairs. And we took one chair and upholstered it bright green. Green is one of our brand standard colors, and we call it the customer seat at the table. And basically, no one's supposed to sit in it because you're not a customer. But it reminds us, it's a visual cue for, are we all talking to ourselves, right? Is there we need to be looking, is the customer have an input at seat at this table? Are they telling us what they think, or are we all just making a bunch of assumptions, which doesn't provide for the best opportunities to drive success? Idea. Yeah, so it's something small, but I really think those are the little things, because it's very easy to get caught up when you're innovating or developing products or services. You just get so excited. It's exciting, right? So you just kind of keep going. It's a good check-in. I think check-ins are important, and if you can use a visual cue to do it, great. So it's just simple, but that's one of my inputs that helps.
Ed, you look like you might want to add anything here.
Yeah, I think you know, you can see it probably in different ways, but I've been in a multitude of startups and large enterprises. We can't forget, I call it the learner's mind, but re-inspiring people around being explorers, being scientists, being experimenters, much like Beth was saying, that constant iteration. And I think if you bring that energy into your organization through different kind of frameworks, different ways of thinking, you know, I don't think anyone's going to argue with, let's have a seat at the table for our customers. Let's go talk to our customers. Yet we miss it a lot in startups and in large enterprises, the fundamentals, but you can't argue with the fundamentals. Let's understand our consumer, their journey, what personas are we serving, what pains do they have? You know, how can we find, and I'm reading, you can probably tell I'm reading the book called Moments right now, but not only the moments that we can see, what are the moments that we can't see? So, you know, Beth, in your case, I'm sure you think about the whole journey of someone using, you know, your products, right? You know, when they wake up in the morning, when they enter their space, when they leave the space, what is that all? So are there key moments before and after that, you know, you can look at or address, or any of us can? So what are those surprising things we can look for? And that's why I bring back, you know, the explorer mindset. Hey, we're all scientists. Let's go observe our you know, consumers. So let's not forget that energy that, you know, we can bring to our organizations as business people, designers. Let's re-inject that and create that excitement around what we do.
Okay, let's move to best practices. And Michael, since we have you here, let's have you jump into that. Can you share some best practices that companies can implement to ensure they really are designing for the right problem? We've talked a lot about this, but maybe some specific best practices. Okay?
Sure, yeah. So I think easy in the rush of getting a product through development and meeting the deadlines to skip over stuff. But definitely like we've been talking about, backing up and defining the problem well, making sure you think you've got a good understanding of what you need to be developing for, and doing the research, of the ethnographic research and the research, the technology research to start out at the right place is very important to that. Then as you go through, it's I mean, we've heard it before, but you have to iterate, you have to test, you have to always take it in front of consumers and see how they react. There's been innumerable times when I've done it and others, we've come up with a product, we think we've covered all the bases, we take it to a new user group, and kind of like we talked about before, they start doing something totally different. And if you don't, it's easy to think you're done. But if you don't have that in place, to that double check to go back and disaster check it again, for lack of a better word, it's really easy to miss something that was important. So then after that, you've got to make sure the rest of the business is tied out. You've got to make sure people are on board. I think a lot of times as we're innovating, we think, oh, this is so obvious, it's so great. But there's a lot of other things in the business that matter. Timelines, production facilities, marketing budgets, things like that are important. And you've got to go back to be successful getting things out. Anybody can design, you can design a good product, but to be successful and get it to market and make it a good business, you've got to make sure you've got all the stakeholders in place. And that's another, best practice, I think, for designers, to make sure that they've taken it and socialized it, and gotten buy-in across the organization that this is the right way to go. They haven't made it just a little bit too big so that now it won't fit on the shelves at Walmart, something like that. That's the kind of problems that if you don't get everybody's buy-in, you can run into.
Yeah.
Can I piggyback
totally
off of that? You said something that really resonated, which it goes to best practices, but it's plan for it. Like, you need to, allocate the resources that you need for research and for iteration and for testing. And I think it goes to the buying in of the organization. I mean, I think there needs to be a clear understanding, because sometimes I think you get that, oh God, do we have to research it again? We already researched it, like more. And that speaks to this understanding throughout the organization that yes, like to get it right, it's worth the dollars to go back and check and speak to your customers again. But I do think sometimes that takes socialization, as you mentioned, and it certainly takes planning for it. So when you're setting up budgets for the year, you need to be, expecting that it's going to cost you dollars to be able to do it right, and get people to express those concerns early if they're not on board. You can get creative in getting feedback, but I think you have to plan for that. And so best practices would be assume that you're going to be spending resources, people's time, money, et cetera, on making sure that you have iterated and gotten the feedback you need to put the best product and service out there. It'll help everybody in the end. Yeah,
so true, so true. We're just going to do one more brief question, then each panelist will do a quick wrap. We'll keep it succinct so that we can get to your questions. So Ed, I'm going to jump to you. What do you wish you knew before you were getting started designing products that you maybe know now and you wish you knew before?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about it, but, go out to your consumers. I think early in my career, I suffered from kind of internal innovation, thinking inside, and the real answers lie outside of your company with your consumers. And then, really, I think, and I've developed this over my career, but the ability to really leverage and learn things really rapidly to bring into your organization. So, design and design thinking methodologies, 101 Designs is a great, book. 10 Types of Innovation I've already mentioned, but Google Sprint. What we do as a team internally is we'll look for those new methods, those new things. We'll deconstruct it, and then we'll leverage that internally to then drive teams through. And, the Google Glass example that I gave, as well as many others, we deconstructed Google Sprint methodology and drove teams. Now we're able to do that time and time again, and leveraging those different tools for depending upon what you're solving for. So you may have a consumer, or consumer-driven problem to understand that, or you may have a business-driven problem. So really spilling over into different disciplines as much as possible, because everything is interconnected. So, when you go to do, sprints, you better know who your personas are to create your epic stories and what business problems you're solving. So, learning as rapidly as possible, and then really understanding the problem at a deep level.
Okay, makes sense. I'm going to jump to the summary, so I'm realizing we're getting a little later in time. So Ed, since I have you up here, let's just recap 2 key tips for designing successful innovation products or services that consumers will love, the topic of the day. 2 quick ones, and we'll go around the horn.
Be an explorer, and be a scientist as well, and just do discovery and solve those problems.
Excellent. Beth?
Understand and then know how to communicate the true value that you're bringing to your customer. And check-ins are really critical. And I think one last thing that we didn't talk about, but I think is really important to highlight right now, is if you can't do it yourself, like we're a small organization, that's okay. Hire people that can. So you don't have to take it all on, but just know you need it and get the people to help you make sure you get it done. Like Altitude.
Great. Yeah, thank you. No, we love working with Symmons. Some exciting things happening.
Yes, very.
So, and Michael, let's give it one more shot.
Right. So, yeah, I was going to say, definitely always try to keep the mindset of the person who's coming to a product or an experience as though they've never touched it before. And again, that kind of goes, I think that's such a big deal. We've talked about it before, but you've got to try to set that aside as you're developing things, you're looking at the process as you're going through it. So I think that's one of the biggest ones. And then involving other people, get more eyeballs on what you're doing, especially people who've never seen it before. That's where you find the problems, and the problems end up driving the innovation. That's I think one of the most important things. You can make those discoveries in those situations when you put it in front of the newbies to it, and those are the fun ones for me, where you really discover, wow, this is something we never thought of. So,
are you seeking a significant difference in ROI when comparing consumer versus new and improved product modifications?
I can speak to that. I think part of it depends on the innovation in and of itself, what you're learning. So if what you're going to find out about ends up being pretty large and extensive, I think when I think about the ROI, I think about like the return on investment might not be for some time, right? So if you're really doing deep customer understanding at a level you've never done it before, then you're likely not going to have something to bring right back to market within a year or two. So I think I don't expect the return to be so quick. So for me, it's a time frame thing. Whereas if you're doing a product extension and you're getting a little bit of an additional customer understanding to change a current product line, which is still something new to the market, then I think your expectation is that your ROI, you're going to see that pretty quickly, that you would expect that as a company. That's how you can plan to grow. So for me, it's a time horizon thing. We need ROIs on everything we do. We're a business, you can imagine. But I may expect a larger ROI over a longer time frame for something that we would characterize as more disruptive in our category.
Great. I'm just going to have one.
Beth, I love.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Beth, I love the fact that you said horizon, because the way I think about it, and a new model that I've been really learning is horizon planning. So your H1 is Horizon 1, which could be a product extension, so it's your existing market. Horizon 2 is within the same product category, but a new innovation potentially. And then Horizon 3 is a truly new innovation. But the point is you should be investing in each one. And then your Horizon 1 may be diminishing over time. And that's why you do have a Horizon 2 and 3.
Great point. Great point.
All right, the next question, how do you define disruptive innovation? How is disruptive innovation expected to impact your organization?
Is that because I said disruptive innovation? No, I'm just kidding. No, it's a great question. I think for me, anything that is not adjacent to a category that we're currently in, like we have a core business that's really focused on, plumbing products and manufacturing plumbing products. We're a manufacturer, but now we're looking at things that are outside of our category, that are in the technology world, more around managing water. So for me, that would be pretty disruptive, because we would be looking at something that's not right in our core, that could actually change people's lives and how they look at water. That's disruptive, right? But I also feel like our world is headed in a way where you can't not be looking at that. So truth be told, this conversation, the word technology, if you think about how much we use the word technology in this last hour, my prior career was at Gillette, which then became P&G. I mean, we just talked about products. We didn't talk about technology, right? Everything was product-based. It was very consumer product-based. And I feel like we've moved so much towards a technology-driven world that there's going to be a lot of opportunities for things that are what would be considered more disruptive as the world is becoming technologically advanced in like hyperspeed.
All right, just a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap. And I think regarding most of the other questions, here's one more. Who conducts the ethnographic studies? Do you employ social scientists specifically for this function? I think, Beth, you talked about that, right?
Yeah, we hire people to help us where, we don't have that many people. We don't have an R&D group or a specific experiential research group. So when we know we need that, we hire people to help us do it, and partners that work with us to make sure that we're aligned and
No, excellent. And thank you for hanging in there, Michael. I know we had a few technical glitches. And for the folks listening in, I absolutely thank you for listening in and hanging in for a few of our technical delays. And for the panelists, absolutely stellar insights. I really thank you very, very much for joining us. Ed from UnitedHealth /Fusion, and Beth from Symmons, and also Michael from Capital Factory. I really thank everyone for their time. For the folks listening in, next month's Hangout will be with Gerber Technology, EF Education First, and Accenture Innovation Lab. And it's called How Much Design Iteration is Enough. So it's a good segue from this Hangout. And I hope you'll join in. Again, thank you very much for our panelists. Thank you to the folks listening in, and have a great day. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.